Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to build a small farmhouse side table step by step using 2x4 and 2x6 lumber. This is one of my favorite beginner woodworking projects. It's simple, affordable, and a great way to start building farmhouse furniture, even if you've never done it before. Now this one stands about 20 inches tall. You can make yours taller or shorter to fit your couch, chair, whatever needs you have. I designed mine around the furniture in my living room so it fits perfectly next to our couch. And that's a great thing about DIY projects is you can customize everything to fit the space you need it to fit in. And if you need a cut list, take a second, pause the video, and copy the cut list off of here. Now the top pieces for this table are 15 inches long. I'm actually going to cut mine a little bit longer, around 15 1/8 inch. So after I glue them together, I can trim the edges perfectly square. That's a good trick for beginners. Also a trick I still use today. It's a lot easier to come back and make that final cleanup later than to figure out you're short. I'll start with my 2x4 lumber. I'm not going to cut the top or bottom pieces yet. I'm just cutting the main structure pieces to get them ready first. The first step is to rip the rounded edges off your 2x4s and 2x6s. Construction lumber has those soft edges that don't look great on furniture, so it gives them a clean square edge to work with. But since we are using farmhouse furniture, you can leave the one side. The problem's going to be is when you rip it down the sides, you're still going to have to round the other side off. And can you get the round over to match? It's easier just to do both edges if you're going to round it back off again. And we'll start by putting our eyes and our ears on. And I'm going to move my table saw fence just enough so the blade barely touches that round edge. I'll tap the fence in slightly until I'm taking off just the curve, not too much. Remember, you want to end up with a 3-inch wide board. Since the 2x4 is actually only 3.5 inches wide, removing a 1/4 inch from each side will give you that nice square 3-inch stock that we're looking for. I always think it's better to take small passes and keep your boards consistent than to try to rush through it and make a bad cut. Once I've got that first side ripped flat, I'll flip the board around, run the other edge through, and that'll give me a chance to make a perfect 3-inch width and much more professional looking board. Each leg will be made from 3-inch wide pieces. The cross supports are only going to be 1.5 inches wide, so we're going to rip a few of those down to size as well. I like to do all my ripping so that each piece ends up with the same width. So if I need 3-inch pieces, I try to cut all the 3-inch pieces at the same time. We're going to do the same with the 1.5 inch pieces. And there should be enough to get 2 of those out of each of those 3-inch wide boards if you just ripped over the rounded edge. So now we're going to take our 3-inch pieces and make our front, back, and cross pieces. They're going to be 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. We should be able to get those out of the 3-inch pieces that we ripped down. And once I set my fence to 1.5 inches, I'm just going to push those boards through. For the tabletop, we're going to be using 2x6s and 2x4s. The 2x6 boards will be cut down to 4.5 inches wide, and the 2x4s will stay right around 3 inches after trimming. Now this is your table. You can design it however you want. You can use 2x8s if you want, 2x4s, 2x6s, your choice. This combination gives the tabletop a nice farmhouse look. A little variety within the board widths make it look handmade and not a factory reproduction part. We'll glue all the boards together later, but for now we just want to get everything cut and organized. If you're following along, I always make sure I label my boards, legs, aprons, cross peoples, top boards. That helps keep things straight later on. Plus I know how many of each piece I've got and how many each piece I have to cut. Especially if you're cutting all your lumber at one time like I am. Now you can cut this frame first, put the frame together, top next, put the top together. Again, I just like to cut everything first and then assemble all later. So at this point, all the main structure pieces are cut and ripped to size. We've got 4 legs, 19.5 inches, 2 long aprons, 2 short aprons, 4 cross braces, and the lower X design. And the tabletop boards are prepped and ready for glue up. In the next part, we're going to move on to drawing the pocket holes, assembling the frame, making those X style braces. So what I'm doing now is I'm just laying out my legs so I know what they look like. I've got some idea in my brain what I'm doing, and making sure we've got all the pieces we need. Now that all the lumber's cut, squared up, we're ready to start assembly. This is where it starts to look like real furniture. We're going to connect the legs and aprons using pocket holes in this instance. There's several ways of doing this. In this case, I'm going to be using a Craig jig for this, but any pocket hole system will work. This is one of the easier and stronger joints for DIY farmhouse furniture, and it's perfect if you're just learning how to do woodworking or beginner joinery. We're going to start by marking the top and bottom of each leg so you know which way they face And this matters because we want the cleanest sides facing out. If you have a rough side, you can turn it inward now, or like on the bottom, if one side looks worse than the other, you can flip it whichever way you want. I'll drill 2 pocket holes in each end of the side aprons and 2 on the end of each of the front and back aprons. Then I'll add 2 or 3 along the inside edges of the top rails. That's where we'll attach the tabletop to later. Once the holes are drilled, I'll lay out the 2 side assemblies. That's 1 leg, apron, and lower support per side. I'm marking 2 inches up from the bottom of the inside of each leg. That's where the lower support rail will sit. You can make that bottom rail higher or lower depending on the look you're going for. 2 inches off the floor, give it that classic farmhouse look. Now everything's marked. I add a little wood glue to each joint, line up the apron, and clamp it tight. You always want to use a square to check and make sure that everything is straight before you drive the screws in. A square frame now saves you a lot of time sanding and adjusting legs later. Again, you want to check the inside of the corner and the leg side of the corner. If one of those legs is too short or too high, you're going to end up with a wobble. You can fix it later with some sandpaper, some cutting, but again, we try to fix everything we can now versus trying to fix it after we get it together and figure out the table's wobbly. Once it's square, clamp your clamps down tight enough it won't move on you. And we're going to drive a 2.5 inch pocket screw in. You don't want to over tighten them, you just want them snug enough to pull the joint tight. You don't want to run them in to the point where they strip out. And since you're using construction grade lumber, if one of the boards has a twist or a bow to it, put one screw in first and then straighten the other board out and run the screw in. That way it'll keep you from having a curved board or a bowed board in the middle of your project. Repeat that process for the other side. Once both sides are done, we're going to connect the front and back aprons using the same technique. Glue, clamp, square, screw it in. And after you get that done, you should have a solid rectangular frame, and that'll be the base of your farmhouse style side table. And before you move on, again, always check to make sure everything's level and square. Measure diagonally from corner to corner, make sure you're square. If both measurements are the same, you're good to go. If it's off a little bit, don't panic. As long as you're moving slow and steady, just loosen on the corner, use a hammer, tap it into place, and retighten the screw. As long as you're doing that before the glue dries, you should be perfectly fine. And squaring is a key step in making sure your DIY woodworking project doesn't wobble once it's finished. Now it's time for the detail that really gives it the farmhouse style, the X-shaped cross braces on each side. Now there are several ways of figuring out these angles. I'm going to show you the easiest way as a beginner to learn how to make these. Lay one board diagonally across the inside of the frame. Line it up so both ends touch the inside corners, and then just clamp it in place. Take a pencil, mark it from the inside where the edges meet the frame. It's that simple. That's your cutting angle. Now every table will be slightly different depending on the exact dimensions. So always mark it, make them a little bit long, and trim it down so it fits in there perfectly instead of trying to guess the angle. Now this angle is a little bit more extreme than a normal miter saw will cut. You can cut this off with a handsaw if you want to. I've got another video that shows you how to make this jig, but this will let me cut an extreme angle on here. So I'm going to cut my angle. If you have to, cut a little bit more shallow, and then you can tweak it into place to make it fit. Again, cut these longer and keep making small cuts to make sure that it fits in place. You cut it too short, it's going to fall through, and you're going to be starting over again. It's easier to take a little bit off than to add a little bit on. Now, if everything was square when you started, you should be able to make 2 of these. So make 2 pieces the exact same cut. And then we're going to make a cross section, and we're going to either half lap the joints, or you can cut them and screw them in multiple pieces. Whichever works better for you. So I'm going to take my second cut piece and I'm just going to fit it in place. Sometimes they fit better one way than the other. Again, if your angles aren't exactly perfect, figure out which way fits in there best from you and just keep tweaking them until you get them to fit in there to your satisfaction. Now to half lap this joint, I'm basically going to fit one end towards the outside edge, one end towards the inside edge, and we're going to take a pencil and we're going to mark where the 2 intersections cross. Now once we mark this, we're going to go back over to the miter saw, we're going to cut our angles. Now again, depending on how comfortable you are with this, I'm going to actually cut my pieces off and we're going to attach them. You can half lap this if you have the ability, or if you want to half lap it. There's videos online how to half lap it. To me, it's faster and easier for the farmhouse furniture just to do it this way. So I'm going to cut out that middle section, basically the part that was in between our crossroads, and we're just going to glue in the top section and the bottom section independently from each other. Now, same as before, you want to cut these a little bit long and you want to fit them into place. You don't want to cut it too short and have to go back and do it. So go back and forth until you get them to fit in there, again, the way that you want them to fit. Now, these are not structural, these are decorational. So you can glue these in place and they should be perfectly fine. Once the glue is dry, they'll never come out. But if you want to, you can do a pocket hole and you can drill down into it to hold it in place. Again, for the most part, I just glue them, clamp them up. 24 hours later, it's not going to fall apart on you. Now that the base is assembled, it's time to prep for finish. You want to take a sander and go everything with like an 80 grit sandpaper, depending on how you want to finish this. If you're going to antique it or something, you don't have to do a lot. Just get off the glue and any sharp or rough edges that you may see. So we're ready to start on our tabletop. Now I've got my pieces laid out here in the way that I want them. I've got the faces up that I want up, faces down that I don't want up. I haven't sanded or anything with these. These are just pre-laid out, ready to go. I've got an extra edge over here. I want to put the top together before I put the sides on. I put the middle section together first, and then I can cut it square and then put the end boards on. Now you can sand all these down if you want, just to make my life easier. I shoved them through the planer, basically just to get all the writing and stuff off of them, all the dirt off of them. Now I did this video a few years ago. I'm just redoing the voice overlay on it. I way overkilled this. You do not need that many pocket screws in the top. You can actually just glue it together and clamp it. It'll be perfectly fine. If you want, and you're going to use it for heavy duty purposes like in a shop or a garage, you can add pocket screws to it. You just don't need as many as I did here. Now when I put this together, I just put glue between the boards. I took some clamps. I put light pressure on the clamps just to hold it in place to keep everything from moving on me while I put the screws in. So the clamps aren't in there tight. The screws are actually doing all the holding. I'm going to flip it over, wipe off any excess glue that I've got on here, and then we're going to cut off the edges to make them straight. Once I cut the first edge off, I'm going to flip it around and I'm going to cut the other side. If you want to, you could throw this on your table saw. I'm not sure why I didn't throw it on the table saw at the time. I guess I was just showing a different technique for cutting it without having to use a table saw, but you can do all this with a skill saw also. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a couple pocket holes in it, clamp it, glue it, and then cut the ends off so they're nice and even. Now I want to make a bottom for this table, so basically I'm just going to measure the hole in the bottom and make me a panel that will fit in it, and then we're going to make us a couple cleats out of some leftover pieces of wood, put the cleats in, and then attach the boards to it. Again, I want different size planks. You can put 3 planks, 4 planks, whatever you want to make it match your style. But we want it to look like plank wood in here so it keeps that farmhouse look. I'm going to end up distressing this table, so I went ahead and painted the frame black while I had it at this point, since my frame's already done technically, and I'm going to distress it. I'm not worried about the paint getting banged up. So I went ahead and painted it. I've got my bottom piece here so it drops through the hole, which is perfectly fine. And again, we're going to take some cleats. We're going to put some cleats on the inside edges, measure our thickness, and make sure our board fits perfectly onto the bottom of the table where it fits nice and flush. And another thing to remember when you're cutting your cleats, these are basically just supports underneath. They're going to screw into the side frame. Make sure when you cut them not all the same length. You want them to fit inside of each other like a square, so you're basically making a square frame. So 2 should be the same size as one board. They should fit to the inside. They should not go to the corners together because, of course, they're not going to fit in there if you make them all 4 the same size. So I've got my pieces here. I pre-drilled some holes so I didn't split the wood when I put them in. And I'm taking a piece of scrap material the same size, and I'm just going to line it up with my cleat. I'm going to take a clamp, put it in from underneath, clamp it in place, and that way I can screw it down without it moving, and I know it's the exact thickness of my material, so my piece fits in there nice and flush. Once I get it level, we're going to shoot a few screws in it. Now I decided to go with an early American stain for this, so I went ahead and stained the top and the bottom, and while those are drying for the next day or two, I painted the outside framework white over top of the black, And then we're going to take a sander. You can take a hammer. You can do whatever you want to distress the paint, basically. So you're going to take your brand new paint job and you're going to mess it up. In this case, we didn't want to go super distressed, so I just took the sander and hit it in a bunch of places. I didn't really want to beat the wood up. I like a nice, clean, finished piece of wood, but I do like the way the paint scuffed off of it and looks like that. Again, your piece, design it how you want. Now the stain's dry, we're going to flip it over and we're going to attach the bottom to the top. Again, that's why we drilled the pocket holes in there earlier. I'm just going to align this up. I'm going to measure it. It's easier to do it like that while it's upside down. Clamp it in place, and while the clamps are in place, put your screws in it. The bottom piece, figure out which way you want to go in there. We're going to slide the bottom piece in, and you can either leave that floating or you can take some screws, just as long as they're not too long, and run them from the bottom up to keep it from moving. And there it is, a custom farmhouse styled table made entirely from 2x4, 2x6 lumber. This is an awesome beginning woodworking project. Teaches all the fundamentals, straight edges, drilling pocket screws, gluing panels, and finishing techniques. Hit that like and subscribe button and let me know how your table turned out in the comments below.